Want to let the room fill up here. We've got about maybe 1 to 2 minutes before our presentation starts here. If you are watching the replay right now, go ahead, skip ahead maybe 1 or 2 minutes and you'll get to the beginning of the real full presentation here. But as the room fills up, just want to let anybody know, hey, type into the chat, whatever platform you're on. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube. Drop into your chat where you're calling in from, where you're watching this from, and then go ahead and tell us what part of the industry are you in. Are you a cultivator, a manufacturer, a distributor, retailer, delivery, maybe your ancillary service like green growth, or you're a lawyer? Just let us know where you're at, and then we'll go ahead and we'll hop in for the presentation here. I'm excited to talk about. There's a lot of things going on in October for the cannabis industry. There's way more than I can cover in the hour that I've allotted for this. We'll probably go for an hour and 15 minutes. But let's go ahead and just maybe 1 more minute. When it hits 12 o'clock Pacific, 3 o'clock Eastern, we will go ahead and jump right into the presentation. So a few more seconds here while the room fills up. Good. There's a lot of people jumping in here, I can see. So go ahead. Nice. JC says they're from Eswatini. Not sure where that's at, but nice. Good to have you in here. Thank you for joining. Again, drop in the chat wherever you're at, whatever platform you're on, where you're calling in from, where you're watching this. And then about 10 seconds here, we'll get started. Sam says that he's enjoying the videos. Great content. Hey, thank you very much, Samuel. I appreciate you joining and watching and learning along with us, right? The industry is pretty young. A lot of people I've been speaking to in the past few weeks have been saying the same kind of sentiment here, that we're in the second inning of the cannabis industry, right? We've gotten a lot of the beginning stuff done, but we're working out the kinks, and there's a whole lot more to go going forward. Samir is in Los Angeles. Good to have you here. We're going to cover some stuff about LA, but all right, it is the top of the hour. I want to start on time because I said I would. So again, thank you for joining the Green Growth CPA's October monthly cannabis industry update. Now, before we get started, I need to let you know that the information contained in this presentation is for guidance purposes only and not as professional legal or tax advice. And further, it does not give any personalized legal, tax, investment, or any business advice in general. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about what our agenda is today. So first, we're going to go over, big industry updates, trends that we're seeing from the month of October for the cannabis industry, things like licensing and regulations, legal updates, taxes, finance and M&A, and then just some miscellaneous things. And then finally, I'll take questions from the audience. But throughout this entire presentation, drop your questions in so I can hop into them maybe right away, or we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Now, if you need any help with finance, tax, or accounting for your cannabis business, then please reach out to us via our website at greengrowthcpas.com, or give us a call at 800-674-9050. So with all that administrative stuff out of the way, let's hop into some of the top articles this month from licensing. Now, one of the first ones that come across to me that really strikes me hard is that New York will legalize cannabis soon to aid the economic recovery from COVID. And Governor Cuomo says this, right? This is something that, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo recently said that legalizing cannabis represents a key way for the state to recover economically from the coronavirus pandemic. Now, during a virtual event last week to promote his new book about their response to the pandemic, he says about adult use for cannabis that soon, because we need the money. Now, he tried to get it done a few years prior, and there's a lot of reasons why, to actually do get it done, because it brings revenue, and all states need revenue right now. And cannabis is going to put it over the top, and that's his words, not mine. So, they've put this in the budget a few times here, and there have been some sticking points about it, but hey, they said maybe early 2021, projecting for April 1st. So, hey, if they can push this through the legislature, you're going to see a lot of things start to move, right? You've seen this same type of legislative move in New Jersey, New Mexico, and potentially in Pennsylvania, or at least governors trying to push this to happen. You're going to have New Jersey turn on, Vermont's already on, Maine is turned on. We could see a Northeast pact between these states as they're all turning on at once. I'm sure there's going to be some type of, have to be an agreement. These states are incredibly small in land mass wise, but very dense with people. And I'm sure there's a lot of interstate travel between these. So we'll see how it all shakes out. New York turning on potentially in the second quarter or third quarter of 2021. Now, California Governor Gavin Newsom approves some changes to cannabis banking. Now, during the last month, 4 cannabis bills passed through California. Now, we talk a lot about California. Why do we talk a lot about California? A, it's one of the biggest markets on the planet for cannabis, but B, a lot of the winds of cannabis, WINDS, the winds of cannabis travel from the west to the east. Now, that also does bring some of the bad parts of cannabis from the west to the east coast. Now, when you look at what happened in California this month, again, 4 bills. There was one specifically situated around cannabis banking. Now, when you saw this headline, you're probably like, oh, everybody can go get a bank account. But this bill essentially just limited the state penalties assigned to any bank that banks cannabis money. Now, that's great. It sounds good in theory, but it really doesn't do much for these banks because all banks still need to report to FinCEN for all the reporting requirements. And that's the biggest sticking point for these banks that don't want to take cannabis money because it takes a lot of time, resources, and money to do all of the reporting and management of these cannabis bank accounts. That's why they become significantly more expensive. So, hey, look, it's good. State chartered banks, this still doesn't just open them up to a free-for-all because state chartered banks still have to report to FinCEN. But it is a move in the right direction that the state is not going to pursue legal action against banks that help the cannabis industry. Now, another bill, SB 67, that the governor signed as well, helps to establish what they call cannabis appellation programs. Now, what this means is going to indicate where cannabis is grown and how that might influence its character. Now, this system is similar to how wine is regulated. Now, if you're going to get a Bordeaux, it is from a specific part in France, and it has a specific flavor, and the soil has a mineral composition and certain rain and humidity levels, which all go ahead to make the profile of that Bordeaux wine. Now, this is very, very futuristic looking for the cannabis industry. It's going to be great to help as a marketing tactic, the appellation stuff, but we'll see how this all develops, right? This is only for outdoor grown cannabis. So we'll see. We made a full video on this. You can look through our YouTube channel. We made it, I believe, in the beginning of the month or mid-month. So check that out. Omar Figueroa walked us through what this really means. Pretty cool stuff there. Now, another article about regulations and licensing is that you may have seen that the Mexican Senate is voting on cannabis legalization by the end of this month. Now, the Mexican Senate said that they're likely to vote on a bill again to legalize cannabis at the end of this month. Now, activists have been waiting eagerly on the action for reform since the Supreme Court deemed personal possession and cultivation of cannabis unconstitutional in 2018. Though, check it out. The High Court granted a second deadline. It was supposed to be done by April 15th and legalized. We talked about it a little bit at that time. Now they pushed this deadline to December 15th, but I think, since the virus and all this stuff has happened, they're pushing out certain legislative deadlines. So we could see another, big mega country legalize cannabis. You've got Canada at the north and you've got Mexico in the south. They're kind of making a cannabis sandwich out of us here, and we are not getting the good end of this. Okay, so, but one thing to think about when a country turns on like this, you look at what is the current composition of growers and producers in that country. Now, Mexico has 200,000 family grow operations throughout the country. Now, the question is, who should we allow large international companies to come in here and pretty much just, compile and close up the market, consolidate the market is the word I'm looking for. Now, who knows really how this is going to come out, but, one of the things that people are seeing here is that, cannabis is making a lot less seizures here. It's down to 270,000 pounds being seized per year. I think last year, 2019, but 10 years prior, it was 4.3 million pounds. So legalizing cannabis is actually lowering the amount of cannabis being trafficked into the United States. So I think legalization could be a good move for both countries. We'll see how this all plays out. Now, another one that came across my desk here that I thought was pretty interesting was that retail cannabis applicants in Maine, they might be getting disqualified. They are getting disqualified. Now, 12 of the 43 applicants for a municipal permit in Portland, Maine are facing disqualification. Now, they've sent letters out to these people, and these applications are being disqualified for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, they're lacking a state license. they're being late on their local taxes or their fees in the past 5 years. That's the most important part. I'll talk about that in a minute. There's land use disputes and there's zoning issues. Now, really what I want to talk about here is that in the cannabis industry and any other industry, but we'll just, because we are in the cannabis industry, is that, look, if you are paying your taxes late, if you're paying your fees late, this is all on paper. And the regulatory authorities, since this is such a hyper-competitive licensing industry, any little thing that they can do to ding your application, they will do, because there's a lot more people that want to be in this industry than there are licenses. So make sure that you are paying your taxes on time and paying them fully, as well as make sure you're hitting all of your permit fees and any other fees that come up that you have to pay. Now, this is not a discussion about are these fair or unfair fees or taxes. You have to pay them. You signed up to be in this industry. You better pay your fees. You better pay your taxes, or you could end up like one of these businesses and not being granted a recreational license once the state actually turns on for recreational. So if you are a medical cannabis business, please make sure you're paying your taxes on time. If not, it could shoot you in the foot much later down the road when you go to try for a recreational cannabis business license. Now, let's go. The next few articles here are going to talk about states loosening up their licensing requirements or their processes, making them a little bit easier to deal with here. Now, one thing I saw here, I'm based in Michigan now, so this article caught my eye, is that Michigan is going to open up access to the recreational cannabis market even further in March to help curb illegal market sales. Now, as of March 1st next year, certain newly licensed recreational cannabis businesses, retailers, processors, transporters, safety labs, different types of cultivation businesses will no longer be required to first hold a medical cannabis business license, to get their recreational license. Now, what this is going to mean is that there's going to be lower application and licensing fees for businesses not wishing to grow, sell, test, process, or transport medical cannabis. And it's going to open up the market access to new businesses. For instance, in those communities that have not opted into the medical cannabis market, but that would participate in the recreational market, right? There's a discrepancy. In most states, not every municipality is going to jump on and say, hey, anybody can do this, right? Most states are going to be giving the cities a little bit of leeway and regulation around, will they allow commercial cannabis activity? For example, in California, 2/3 of the cities do not allow commercial cannabis activity. So what this really does is that, hey, this system was built to incentivize those that really took on the huge risks before this was actually a legitimate industry in the eyes of the regulators. So now they're starting to back down and say, all right, let's make this a little bit easier to get into for the Michigan cannabis businesses. So I think this is a great idea. I think letting the free market decide a little bit more instead of these really strict licensing requirements, it's not just stressful for the operators or potential operators, it's a super headache for the regulators, because all this stuff is very new to everybody in the industry, to entrepreneurs and to the regulators. And when they have all these problems come up, we're going to talk about a significant amount of lawsuits that started this month as well around licensing. But again, what you're seeing is that they want to also to curb this illegal cannabis trade. If they license the cannabis businesses and they make more of these licensed cannabis businesses, there's a trust factor that's built into that, which will hopefully curb the illicit market. Now, let's dovetail into the next one, is that Humboldt County, which is a county in California, famously known in the Emerald Triangle, those supervisors of that county are easing the cannabis permitting requirements, which is great. So they're going to be streamlining the process, issuing zoning clearance certificates that have minimal permit requirements and exempt road improvement requirements. Now, certain properties, they want to do a small scale grow of under 2,000 square feet on a 5-acre or larger parcel. There's not a lot that needs to be changed, but they have to go through all these very heavy requirements and licensing restrictions similar to every other large cannabis operator. So Humboldt County, big ups to them, because they're streamlining the process for these smaller grow operations. So they don't have to, again, compete and do all the heavy requirements that the larger businesses are doing. And lastly, on the streamlining stuff, is that Oregon is streamlining their license application process for adult use cannabis businesses as well. Now, cannabis regulators in Oregon adopted temporary rules for recreational cannabis business licensing applicants to speed up the entire process and help to ease the licensing backlog. Again, what I just said, it's really, really a lot of work for these regulators to push these applications through and to do it in a way that's fair, as well as to mitigate any legal impact for the city or for the state. Now, key changes to this licensing application process include altering the definition of an applicant, including the raising of the ownership threshold from 10% to 20%. Usually with owners, you have to do a lot more due diligence on the owners, whatever that threshold is. So by raising that threshold, they have to do a lot less background checks and due diligence on these owners. Now, also the second update is going to be revising the licensing application requirements, including lessening the amount of required information. So I'm sure that everybody in Oregon is like, thank goodness that we don't have to get, even like your, grandmother's birth certificate. It's crazy the amount of things they ask for. So lessening the amount of things that they ask for, and the third part here is adjusting the notification and pre-approval requirements when a licensee alters the structure of the business or the financial interest. And then again, lastly, modifications to background checks and fingerprinting applicants that will streamline the entire process. So again, from west to east, hopefully this stuff starts to move to other jurisdictions to make these licensing processes just easier. It's burdensome. It's a regulated industry. I understand that there needs to be a fair amount of regulation, but it's becoming incredibly burdensome and incredibly expensive. And we'll talk about that in a moment here about the Illinois stuff that's going on. But hopefully we can start to loosen up these licensing requirements here. Now, if you are a cannabis business, you've probably seen, audits happening where your local cannabis regulation czar comes through or a representative comes through and they want to see a bunch of different things. But with the pandemic happening, we are now starting to see virtual audits happening in the state of California. Now, the CDPH is doing virtual inspections because, again, of COVID, and they're having you upload an intense amount of paperwork. Things like your master manufacturing protocols, product safety protocols, plus your batch records, pictures of all your metric tags on all the products, records of employee safety and training on manufacturing equipment, and pictures of all your manufacturing equipment. So there's also a follow-up call with your inspector. Now they're paying very, very close attention to metric accounts with very specific questions, why you're doing this or why you're doing that. Also, they're looking again at the batch production records. So it's very, very important that you stay organized, right? You may even have to hire another person to come in part-time to make sure that all of your compliance records and all the record keeping requirements are being fulfilled, because I don't know specifically too much about these virtual inspections and what the ramifications in the time frame and all that is. But virtual inspections may become one of the new norms if we start to scale up the amount of cannabis businesses and you have a limited budget on the enforcement side or on the regulation side. They're probably going to find ways to do these virtual audits in many other cities and states. So highly suggest that if you do not have your stuff or don't feel confident that your paperwork is up to snuff, please take the time to do a pause, TV timeout, go through all of your paperwork, make sure things are in order so that if you do happen to go through one of these virtual audits, you're ready and you're confident that you're going to pass that audit. Now, let's check the questions here, see if there's anything being dropped in. All right, I don't see any specific questions. I'll hop in a moment here, but let's continue with the updates here. We're still on the licensing and regulation updates. Now, Maine has launched their recreational market. They sold $100,000 in cannabis on the first day, raising $9,000 in sales tax revenue. So this is great stuff here. So lots of states turning on. I think Vermont turned on as well. So we'll see how this all shakes out. I think Maine is going to be a great little spot to be in. Again, part of that northeastern United States pact that I'm predicting. I hear rumbles about it. Maybe it happens. Now, I think there's 2 more here in licensing, 3 more here. LA. Okay, so we talked about this last month, I believe, or earlier this month I talked about this, is that LA has opened up a new set of licensing for cannabis deliveries, distributors, non-volatile manufacturing, and for testing labs, okay? Now, it opened up on the 20th of October, so just about a week, 8 days ago, and they had fewer than 100 applicants in the first 24 hours. Now, if you look at the other licensing from last, September, October, it was multiple hundreds of people applying for these licenses. Now, it was a big, big mess. There's still pending lawsuits going on that we'll talk about later in this presentation. But one of the biggest issues around this, and it's actually, I don't want to call it an issue, nuances of this is that the delivery licenses are only being given to social equity applicants, and no one who is not a social equity applicant, so anyone who's not a social equity applicant can have access to these delivery licenses until 2025, which is a very, very long way away. So, hey, social equity is great in theory, and it looks great in regulation. It's a good pat on the back for all the regulators and for the people that are trying to make this happen. But it's not really going to work when you have a person who probably doesn't make a ton of money, is a social equity applicant, but they need $1 million to open up a cannabis business, especially in LA. The rents are extremely high. Everything else is extremely high in cost. The cost of doing business is high. The competition is hyper high. And you have a huge illegal market, a very mature illegal market. So that's probably one of the few reasons you see, as well as people don't want to jump into the LA market because of all the delays in the lawsuits. You may go through the licensing process maybe 80% of the way and then get hung up 80% of the way because of a lawsuit that then goes on for 2.5 years. And now you got to sit on, rent payments, $10,000 per month or $5,000 per month times 24 months, legal fees and all these other fees that build up. So we'll see how it all comes together. They have no end date for this licensing applications period, and they have no cap on it either. So we'll see how that really goes. But hey, with no cap on those licensing figures there, that pretty much is going to crush the value of these Los Angeles licenses. Really, you're going to have to look to buy a cannabis business and not just a license, because anybody can pretty much now go get a license if you have a social equity applicant as your business partner, which we saw in the first licensing round. That is what a lot of these very, very large cannabis operations did. So that's an update on that. Quick update on Nevada here is that Nevada has been pretty aggressive about, we talked about this, I think, in August, where the Nevada cannabis regulation body is pretty much fining and taking licenses away for pretty small, well, not small, but some infractions. So 2 cannabis companies are being fined $255,000 and $35,000 respectively, and losing licenses for things like not keeping proper security camera malfunction logs, skipping a required audit, not following their cannabis waste guidelines, and having an inventory log that didn't align with their metric or their seed to sale tracking system. So it may seem like, hey, there's so many things to do as a cannabis business, and there are that many things to do, but you should consider hiring a compliance person to make sure that you don't lose your business on something as basic as not keeping a proper security camera log. It would be a shame to get this far in the entire process, run a business, and then lose it because of some, malfunction log that you don't have and find a bunch of money. So be thoughtful on that there. Now, I'm going to check the questions here if there's anything on that. I don't see anything specifically on here, and we'll go ahead and keep hopping in. So let's now cover some tax updates for the cannabis industry. So number one, and we've talked about this, I did a whole video on this, I think on Monday is what we talked about, but a new court case came out, an appeals court decision came down, and pretty much it says, hey, look, the IRS can't audit cannabis companies. Now, again, we did an entire video on this. You should watch that. It's about 25 minutes. It's very, very in-depth and kind of pulling apart the case, and there's 4 specific lessons that I'm not going to cover in this video, but it's very easy to find. Go to our YouTube channel, watch that video. Near the halfway point is where we start the lessons. But essentially what happened is a group in the state of Colorado, a dispensary, had their 2013 and 2014 taxes audited by the IRS in 2016. Now, the IRS needed a little bit more information. An audit is not that you're in trouble. It's just saying that the IRS or whatever tax agency is doing the audit needs more information about a specific line item in your tax return. Now, what the IRS wanted is they wanted metric data, track and trace data. And they asked the company, hey, hand us over this data. They did not comply for a variety of reasons I cover in the video. But essentially, all these, and so what happens, right? The audit happens, they don't want to comply. The dispensary doesn't want to comply. They hire a law firm to say, hey, we want to appeal this decision here. We don't want anything to do with this audit. Well, they lost. And why they lost? Because they keep trying to challenge the legality of 280E for the 20th time. So if you are a cannabis business trying to challenge the IRS on 280E, you're insane, okay? And do not hire the same lawyers that are on all these different complaints here, because what this group did is they hired the same lawyers that use the same false, arguments and to say why 280E is not constitutional, and they got, the appeal was denied. And it was even called out by the judge in the case that all these things have been brought up before in prior cases, and all the precedents have been upheld such that 280E is legal and you have to comply with an audit. At any rate, the IRS is going to get the data from the Colorado cannabis Cannabis Regulation Organization, the oversight committee there, and they're going to get the data anyways. So the big lesson from this: don't fight the IRS on 280E and just comply with them and share the information with them, because now this group is racked up interest and penalties as well as fines, and they have a ton of legal fees that got them nowhere except for being a case study all over the cannabis industry. So please do not challenge the IRS on 280E. Now, the second one here is that you're starting to see San Diego go after cannabis businesses for the specific tax in their area. Now, they've sued a specific farm that is based in Oakland, and that Oakland farm had been selling cannabis to a dispensary in the city of San Diego. Now, they owe about $10,000 in unpaid city taxes. There's a specific tax in the city of San Diego, and most people don't know about it. But if they had a CPA, they would know about it, because that's the CPA's job, is to keep you up on all these things. Now they're being sued. They're being dragged through the media about it. And I'm sure they're going to pay. The owner said in the article that they were going to pay. They just didn't know about it. But it's very important that you know about all the taxes in all the jurisdictions that you are operating in, because ignorance of a regulation is never a valid defense, and it will never be accepted. Maybe one time, but the second time, you will not succeed in saying, hey, we didn't know about it, we'll still pay. You're going to get racked up with penalties, interest, and fines on this, so make sure that you pay, all right? So the last one that comes up here for taxes is that there was a UCLA extension kind of conference, and really the biggest thing that came from it was people from the CDTFA, the IRS, small business associations, talking about these kind of gray areas or how do you call these things here? Tax controversies in the entire tax realm here. And cannabis obviously is one of those. And one of the speakers from this pretty much said that, hey, look, we are ramping up teams to support the cannabis industry and audit the cannabis industry here. And this is pretty much stemming from the Inspector General's report that we did an extensive deep dive on. That came out in March. And pretty much in that Inspector General report, they talked about, hey, the growth of the cannabis industry is incredible, and the IRS auditors are not doing enough to make sure that they're doing the right audits. Primarily, one of the biggest suggestions in there and recommendations was that, hey, look, the IRS needs to use all this public information to find non-filers and underreported income. Again, things like that metric data that we saw in that loss or in the previous tax article that I talked about, but as well as, hey, log into the licensing website for California and find out who all these people are, cross-reference their entity name to a tax filing and see, hey, what is their income? Right? This is the kind of stuff that they are doing now or will be ramping up to do, because the Inspector General of the Treasury, so the IRS's bosses, pretty much told them, do a better job and go find us some more revenue for the country. So lots of different things moving around with that. You have to be prepared for taxes. And if you're going to sit and gripe about how it's a bunch of garbage and it's unfair, guess what? That's your position. You're more than welcome to have that, but there's a lot more people out there that are willing to just put their head down, do the work, pay the taxes, invest in a CPA to actually help you mitigate those taxes, and then hold your breath until 280E goes away or any other tax impediments go away. So Be thoughtful. Look, the IRS is probably hurting for money because there's a lot of businesses that are closing down. Cannabis is thriving right now. So why not go and audit cannabis businesses? They could go on fishing expeditions, which are pretty much send out a bunch of IRS letters and asking for clarity on your COGS. If you don't have any reasonable methodologies or work papers to show how you got to this point, you're going to be in pretty deep owing the IRS. So if you need any help with an audit, if you want to do an internal audit, just to see if you would be ready for an IRS audit, reach out to us. Go to our website, greengrowcpas.com, click the Get Started button in the top right corner, fill out the form, and you can schedule a time right on there to speak with our team. So look, be prepared for audits. We talked about this a long time ago, I think in February, that IRS agents are coming out and saying there will be a tsunami of audits. So be thoughtful, guys and gals, please. This is not us just pumping taxes, and be fearful. This is the person, or the group, the IRS coming out there saying they will come to audit you. So don't cry when they come to audit and say, well, we didn't know this was going to happen. It is coming. All right. So that's all for the tax updates here. We'll go ahead and hop into the legal updates. Now, there is a lot of lawsuits going on. This is seems like the new thing now. It's like the trendy thing to do lawsuits, but this is what a war chest is for. So what you're seeing in Illinois is an incredible amount of lawsuits happening, not like 100 of them, but multiple lawsuits. And these delays are becoming incredibly costly for the licensed applicants here. Now, some successful applicants and finalists for the Illinois lottery for their recreational retail licenses are suing the governor and other state regulators who paused the process last month. Now, the finalists, they want to pretty much, they just want this to go forward, right? They just want this to move forward. There's been some changes in how the scoring is happening and many other changes to this. Now, look, the prime cost of rent and mortgage or your legal, that's going to just drive up the cost of licensing. So when you're going to want to start to look, if you are not in the industry or if you want to get out of one market and go into another, you should consider looking into states that have very favorable cannabis licensing, such as Oklahoma. These states like Oklahoma will see a huge influx in people moving there. When I was down there earlier this month, I met with 3 different groups that were from the state of Michigan. I met with a few different groups that were from the state of California. I met many, probably over 10 groups that were from Colorado and a few from Washington. They're moving in because there's better regulations, it's easier to get started, and it's cheaper to operate your business there. Now, yeah, there is the Oklahoma way, and it is a conservative state, but they are very open because to them, this is just another agricultural product. It's very regulated, but it's no different than soy or corn or wheat to the people and the regulators in the state of Oklahoma. So as we saw in our presentation, cities and states are going to actually start to think about, hey, we shouldn't just do copy and paste regulations and very strict regulations from what they did in LA or what they did in this state or that state. They're going to have to be a little bit more loose with their regulations, let more businesses in to recapture all of this tax revenue. So be thoughtful on that, looking to where these lawsuits are happening, and potentially avoiding those states because it could cost a significant amount more depending on the delay in the licensing process. Now, another lawsuit that really caught my eye, specifically because I have a little bit of experience in the intellectual property space, is that there's a cannabis MSO or multi-state operator out there called Green Thumb Industries, and they are being sued by Edible Arrangements, which is a franchisor of stores that sell those kind of like bouquet-looking food arrangements. Now, Edible Arrangements, they claim that GTI or Green Thumb Industries Incredibles brand infringes upon its numerous federally registered trademarks, including edible and incredible edible, according to a complaint filed within the U.S. District Court in Illinois. Now, Edible Arrangements, they're based in Atlanta, and they say GTI is engaged in unfair competition and deceptive trade practices. Now, the complaint asserts that GTI has no trademark rights over the Incredibles name, and their stylized Incredibles logo is confusingly similar to the Edible Arrangements logo. Now, you'd be going like, hey, this is crazy. Why? they sell food and they sell cannabis. Now, that's one thing, but the fact that GTI's products are made of cannabis makes no matter of this, okay? Look, because cannabis is related and within the zone of edible arrangements, natural expansion, as evidenced by their expansion into selling CBD products, they have, some kind of ground here, it seems like. And the suit also notes that cannabis is federally illegal under the United States, and a trademark must be used in lawful commerce to secure trademark property rights. So we'll see how this all shakes out. GTI is saying these are baseless claims, but understand that IP has to be defended tirelessly. There are entire probably groups in their legal department at Edible Arrangements just to protect the incredible and the edible trademarks. Now, if they win against GTI, it could be wild what happens to the industry. You may not be able to call these edibles or things of that nature. Who knows how this shakes out? But again, we are very early in the industry. And if you have someone like Edible Arrangements who probably is cash rich or has enough to go and fight against these cannabis businesses, you could see a change in the words for the industry or many other lawsuits throughout the space. But we'll see how this all comes together and shakes out. Now, another lawsuit that happened that is coming out here is having to do with medical cannabis reciprocity for the patients. Now, in New Mexico, Ultra Health has sued the state, pretty much saying they're making it unduly hard for for businesses, and they can't even accept these. But here, let me step back. What is reciprocity for other medical states? Reciprocity is such that if you say are a medical patient in state A, you can go over to state B who has reciprocity and go into their shops as long as you show your medical card and your ID. And you don't have to have an ID from that state. Examples of states that have reciprocity, you guessed it, Oklahoma. Okay, very good laws out there. So this lawsuit in New Mexico is saying that, hey, you're requiring patients to have too much stuff and you're limiting the pretty much total addressable market of the cannabis businesses out there. So I think this is going to be a really, really good one to watch. It may set some good precedent such that other lawsuits happen around the country to make reciprocity pretty much a boilerplate inside of cannabis regulations for medical cannabis states. I'm really excited to see how this shakes out. We'll see. It's very early in this one. These can go for a long, long, long time. So we'll see how that comes together. Let me check the comments here. All right. I will get to, Peter, I'll get to your question in a minute. This is great because it's going to dovetail exactly into what I'm talking about right now here. So you may be running a cannabis dispensary and you may be doing text message advertising, or you run any other kind of cannabis business, a delivery, or any kind of business here. There have been a significant amount of TCPA lawsuits happening, which is pretty much the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. And it's like the Can Spam Act, but for the telephones, okay? So you're seeing Ease, they faced a huge lawsuit to this and it settled. There one lawsuit of that, another one went into arbitration. These become very, very expensive. These can become multi-millions, tens of millions, and even hundreds of millions of dollars in damages. For example, a marketing company in Oregon, they got fined $925 million, and then Dish Network got fined $61 million. So this is not a joke that you can just start text messaging all these different groups. You make sure you get some type of consent from the group on being able to send them text messages. All right. So let's go ahead and hop in here. So I want to answer Peter's question here. He says, I'm partnering with a California license holder to start a delivery service in LA. What do you think of Ease's setup as temp staffing agency tech platform for accounting and licensing? Peter, if you could specifically put a little bit more of information on what you're asking here. The question seems a little bit ambiguous. I think if you're going to talk about, I'll just keep answering my viewpoint on this, on what I think you're asking, but if I don't answer it properly, please drop that in here. So in California, there's this thing called AB5, and this is stemming from the Uber and Lyft in the gig economy. And pretty much they're saying that, hey, you cannot classify workers as 1099 or temp workers or as contractors if you're directing them to do a job at a certain time and requiring that they use your platform and this and that. There's a bunch of details about this, and it's big in California. Now, why is the state pushing so hard on this? They say it's to protect the drivers and the workers, but really it's the $9 billion in payroll taxes that they're losing out on. That's probably the main driver of that AB5 push. Now you're seeing a proposal out there, Prop 22. You can read into all that. I am not going to take a stance on that specifically, but hey, look into that. Now, to answer your question, what do we think of Ease's setup as a temp staffing agency and tech platform? I think, hey, if they're going to go into this temp agency thing, they're probably going to, later down the road, they're going to make a mistake at some point that will snag them and cost them dearly, 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 dearly. Look, they're just the Uber of cannabis here, or the Instacart of cannabis. At some point, these people are going to have to be brought on as workers, full-time employees. And this whole, moving as just a temp staffing agency probably won't work out for them. I don't think that'll work out for them. Now, Peter adds here, the idea is I will be paying a royalty to the license holder to start a delivery business. So basically we're partners. Yeah, hey, Peter, this is going to be a longer conversation, but hey, look, it can be worked out. We've done deals. There's one called oh my goodness, it's totally a revenue sharing agreement. There's, different types of agreements to pay someone pretty much to use your license, and you pay them in ways that are legal through the licensing regulations. So please reach out to us and we can help you out with that. You can schedule a time to speak with our team. Yeah, I mean, if you have a temp agency that's going to comply with the requirements and you have like a PEO or something like that that can help out with all that stuff, great, do that. But this is going to require a much deeper dive into the specifics of your agreement and the regulations surrounding that. So, hey, thank you for the question, but I really can't go too much deep into that. Steven Espinosa here asks, what about San Diego about license is hard? There's a lot of hard things about the San Diego licensing process. It's probably costly, like all cities. It's hyper competitive, it's limited, and it's in a highly desirable area, right? There's a lot of money in San Diego, so you're competing with a lot of people that want to be in that area. So that's why I would say that licensing is pretty hard in that area. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into some more updates here. If you have questions, drop them into the chat. I will get right to them when I get a chance here. I want this to be more of a conversation. You listen, you drop questions in, I chat, and boom, boom, back and forth. We'll have a good time here. Okay, so we got a little bit more here on updates. I'll blow through this one real quick. LA is facing another licensing, delivery lawsuit. I brought this up a little bit earlier in our presentation. People are suing. They don't want to have to wait. Normal licensees, non-social equity licensees don't want to wait till 2025 to go ahead and be in the industry. Now, this is a big change, right? This is 5 years waiting period, or 4 years and some change to wait for these licenses to even open up and become available for non-social equity businesses. So there are, probably some merit to these. I'm not sure how it'll shake out, but we'll see how that shakes out. Again, it's really cool and fun and sexy to be in LA delivery or LA, cannabis business, because there's so much tourism, and this is kind of a mecca for cannabis. But hey, if you don't have $200,000 or $300,000 to sit and burn on, going through the licensing process just to put on rent that you can't even operate a business in, consider second or third time to not go into that market. It's going to be expensive, and you're going to see all highly desirable markets. I guarantee the moment that New York turns on, you're going to see a flood of lawsuits, or when they start the licensing process, it's going to be a flood of lawsuits. So we'll see how that comes in and works out for LA. Cat Packer, I wish you the best, because you're getting punched left and right by all these lawsuits. I wish you the best on this. So now let's talk about some finance and M&A updates for October. If you don't know much, September is a pretty quiet month for finance in the general scheme of things. October is pretty much the most volatile month. And you can see that today and yesterday, how crazy stuff has been in the macro markets. And, look, even when the Biden and Harris, I forget who it was, if it was, which one was on TV, I think it was the vice president debate. They said they were going to go and do cannabis reform and legalize and decriminalize, and cannabis stocks just shot up. And they just like, hey, things are going to be great. That's incredible volatility, up and down, up and down. So be very careful when you see things are going up. Hey, what are the fundamentals behind something going up? Don't follow hype. Don't go into FOMO. Look at the fundamentals. Again, we're very, very early in the industry. So let's go ahead and we'll hit on a few finance and M&A stuff. First one, and this should be of no surprise, MedMen is pretty much dead broke right now. The last 2 years has pretty much been a disaster for MedMen. They own several very high-profile dispensaries in the U.S., and their IPO was clearly looked at, for the best interest of them and not of the retail investors. And you've even seen Canaccord Genuity bring their price target down to 0 for this group, for MedMen, pretty much saying, look, they missed all financial expectations. They have, they're not their turnaround strategy to reach profitability has been pretty much non-existent, and they're not able to meet their long-term capital obligations. They've got a ton of debt, hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, and they have no way to service this. They have $10 million of cash on hand. They have, I think it's like 300 or 400 million. I might be wrong. It's at least $100+ million in debt at like a 15% interest rate. That's a lot of money. And if they're not pushing out that money, that cash, they have no way to service it. So you'll likely see in the next 30 to 120 days, MedMen raise up some more capital, incredibly diluting out a lot of people, and we'll see where that takes them. But this could be the biggest, case study in the cannabis industry, how to lose a cannabis business quickly. Everyone 18 months ago was talking about how they want to, be the Apple of cannabis, and MedMen was that, but they're not doing it right. And, MedMen was the rage and super cool. And now, hey, I think the only thing worth is that name and potentially some intellectual property in their licensing. But MedMen's operations is pretty much just crap in the bed here. And financial wise, hey, they may have a great experience inside the store. I haven't been there in many, many months, but financially, this business is struggling, and they were running on hype, and you cannot run a cannabis business on hype or on a name. You need to be fundamentally and financially sound. MedMen is not that. We may see them go to 0, be bought up by more PE maybe, or they take on some debt. We'll see. Now, another thing that we're seeing is that asset sales by big, large public MSOs is increasing. Now, capital might have come too easily in the early couple of years of the cannabis industry. People were just throwing money in like nuts for these big, big businesses. And some companies pretty much did not manage that capital very well, right? They expanded too quickly. They bought too many high value assets because they thought there was a green rush. There's a green rush happening. Guess what? There's no such thing as a green rush. This thing is so early. There's so much opportunity. You don't need to get in right away. Now, they're probably selling all these assets off and raising cash to strengthen their balance sheets. Now, many of them are dropping underperforming assets in smaller markets where there's not a large total addressable market, and preparing for legalization pushes that may come next week. We'll see. Go out and vote on November 3rd. There's 5 states that are up for legalization. But just a few examples here. You're seeing Acreage. They sold their North Dakota cannabis operation for $1 million. They pulled out of Iowa. They have certain assets in they're holding on to in Florida, Oregon, and Michigan that potentially may come up for sale. You're seeing Forefront Ventures, selling a bunch of stuff. Vireo, they sold their Pennsylvania medical operations. They're really, really waiting out for this New York legalization, which again could come in April next year. So when you are trying to think what's happening in the cannabis industry, and as an outsider, if you're not in or if you're not very plugged into the industry, it's hard to see exactly what's happening, but don't follow what people say. Watch what they do and follow the money. If big MSOs are selling out of certain areas, ask yourself why and what assets are they keeping? Why are they building up cash reserves in holding on to assets here, what is the play? What's the move? When you see someone is selling off the Pennsylvania assets or the North Dakota assets, or they're selling off their Arizona assets, all right, let's maybe look at New York. Maybe you should go buy a business in New York. I have a question that got sent in, and I want to talk about kind of what to do about New York, but just keep an eye on where these major companies are placing their capital, because now you have very smart money and investors are saying, hey, y'all better turn a profit, or you guys better find a way to be cash flow positive, or at least, flat, because we can't keep just funding this. This is not tech, right? This is not where you can just, bet against future revenues that much, right? You have to actually build a business here. You can't just be a money pit. All right. We'll keep going. I'm going to skip this. GTI, the same group that's being sued by Edible Arrangements, they announced that they had done an amended sale leaseback for $32 million. That is another way. Sale leaseback is to essentially sell your building to a group who then leases it back to you. You get all that capital back for the building to help build up your war chest and go out to fight this cannabis war here. So we'll see how it all shakes out for them. Let's go ahead and drop and look into some of the stuff here for the questions. All right. Naveed says, what are some pain points in the cannabis distribution space that you see from your clients? Great question. One of the biggest pain points is collecting from the dispensaries. Primarily, you see the ones like the MedMen. They owe distributors millions and millions and millions of dollars. They don't pay because people think it's great to be in MedMen. And the terms for MedMen are, hey, give us the product. We'll pay you when we get the money from the clients. And guess what? They don't pay even when they get the money. So one of the things is collecting. Secondly, is the pain point is in most states, distributors are given the task of collecting excise tax and cultivation tax. One of the things is when you start to collect all this tax money, which could be coming to the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, it looks like, man, we're crushing, we're making all this money. But if you don't earmark that money and put it away to the side, you're probably going to not have the money to pay that tax bill. In California, it's a 50% penalty if you don't pay your excise tax on time. It's 50% if you're 1 day late. So don't use your tax money as operating capital, as working capital. Another one is getting inside of dispensaries. Now, if you have some great brands that you're carrying, it may be easier to get into dispensaries. That's one thing that's a pain point. Another one is having a service area and making sure that you're hitting all of your service areas. In California, it's a very, very large state. It's like 20 hours from north to south. But in California, you cannot drive throughout the entire night. You have to be off the road, I think, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So you may need multiple distribution hubs to hit the entire state so that you can make all of your deliveries in that one day, or specific people to go out there. So it's a pretty intense thing there. As well as, lastly, I'll round it out here, razor thin margins. There's very, very, very little money in cannabis distribution. So make sure that you've got enough money to weather the storm, to find a well-oiled operation and procedure such that you can actually run a profitable business, even on those razor thin margins here. Now, Sharon, thank you for joining. She has something to say in here. She says, I'm seeing a lot of businesses, financials, P&Ls, be it balance sheets, cash statements that are for sale. Only 1 out of 20 in the last month. People have seen, only 1 out of 20 last month. People looking by have said RUN. Yeah, we can help. I mean, look, most cannabis businesses, they thought they were jumping into this money pit. It's very, very, very easy to make revenue in the cannabis industry. It's incredibly hard to keep that revenue because of taxes, mistakes, and many other things. Now, look, if you need help, one of the biggest things to invest in, whether it's with Green Growth or with somebody else, is invest in someone that can help you work on the financials of your business. One small mistake magnified over 2 or 3 quarters throughout the year can become into a huge, huge issue. So be very thoughtful on investing in a CPA or an FA who can help you make sure your business is running properly. Sharon, if you have a hostile takeover, let us know, reach out to us, schedule some time, or email me. I know you have my email. We can help you with that hostile takeover. We did a few of those, I think in the past 18 months. We can always find an amicable way to untie everybody out of that situation. Oh, okay, got you. Said she had only one that was recommended for sale. Yeah, it's tough. Look, the financials are out there when you really peel back the layers. And I'm pretty sure most people haven't run a monthly P&L for the cannabis business. If you haven't run one, run one. And if you can't run one, it's because you don't have the data to do it. And if you don't have the data, you're running blind. And, once you get to the 18th month or 12th month and you have no money, you probably could have known that in the third or fourth month if you had a P&L. This is why a CPA or a bookkeeping service like what Sharon runs is incredibly important, because if you're running blind, your eyes are closed, you're walking towards a cliff, and you don't know where that cliff is at. So when you have good reporting, you understand where that cliff is at, how to avoid that cliff. Maybe you move to the side and walk this way because there's a bridge instead of walking off the cliff. Look, or you pause, you remove things around, and then you proceed forward. It's very, very difficult to keep that money in the cannabis industry here. So let's go ahead and keep hopping in here. Another finance update is that there was a new cannabis REIT, or actually the first of its kind by Subversive Real Estate Acquisitions REIT. They have a pretty much $100 million REIT that came up, and it's called a Real Estate Investment Trust, pretty much opening up a new portfolio. Real estate is a big, big asset in the cannabis industry. It's one of the only parts of the industry that's making good money right now. So if you are starting a cannabis business, one of the things is, hey, it's got a higher probability of failure. Getting stuck in a long-term lease where, hey, you may fail out in those first 5 years and you're stuck with 2 or 3 years at a very high marijuana markup monthly rent, consider buying your building if you have the liquidity to do so, because at least you have a durable asset that you can sell off later. You're building equity in that asset. And maybe it all becomes a wash in a very big learning lesson that, hey, the cannabis industry chewed me up and ate me and spit me out, but I don't have to worry because I have some assets at least throughout this process here, and all that rent money is not to waste. You have some mortgage built up and some equity built up. Now, another M&A here, Harborside, big dispensary group. Steve D'Angelo, the guy with the braids, the godfather of the recreational cannabis industry. His group pretty much, they bought what is it? Where were they in? They were in San Francisco, a dispensary, and let me step back. The San Francisco dispensary just got their CUP, or their conditional use permit, and they were purchased by Harborside. Harborside bought 50.1% equity in a cash and stock deal, $2.1 million, with $1.2 million of that in cash, the rest to be paid in stock. So now you're seeing Harborside has 5 retail storefronts in California, a retail store in Oregon, and a cultivation and manufacturing in California as well. So Harborside expanding, they're a public company. I'm not sure how that affected the stock price, but M&A is a big thing here. If you're a smaller operator, like here, look, this is for a CUP, a conditional use permit, which means that this business is brand spanking new, no revenue, and bought for $2.1 million. So what this means is that don't look at these, M&A deals that are for 30 million, 182 million, or whatever they are. You can still be bought if you're in a critical market that has low licenses, it has a specific demographic, or you are doing something. It's very important to build a financially stable business so you can be bought out later. If you want to be in the industry forever and make this a generational business, great. But if you want generational wealth and you want to sell out, buy an M&A, then do that. But you need to have the finances to back that, or at least something of value, which is the CUP in this instance. So look into that. If you need help with, again, working on the finances of your business, look, reach out to us, go to our website, greengrowthcpas.com, and speak with our team. Now, let's see here. And this is one that caught my eye as well. It's really, really important. So Colorado, the oldest recreational market in the country, their retail sales took a slight slowdown and downturn. Now, retail sales have been, on a pretty steady upward trend month to month in Colorado, despite the pandemic, but that momentum backslid in August. Now, the Colorado Department of Revenue numbers show that $218 million of cannabis was bought in August. That's down 3.4% from $226 million in the previous month. Now, until August, it was in April, it was just going up and up and up and up and up. That's great. You know, people are sheltering in place. They want to buy a lot of cannabis. We talked about that. We said, don't expect this to stay forever, because a lot of that was driven, again, by having, you know, consumers having liquidity and stimulus adding more to that liquidity, and people thinking that this was just going to go away. I think the writing is very clear on the wall, at least stateside, that this pandemic and this virus is going to be here for a very, very long time, and the economic destruction is incredible to people. So we'll see how this shakes out, and we're going to see the September data and October data once it becomes available. If we start to see a downtrend, a continuous downtrend, you may see that same thing happening in other mature markets, the Oregons, the Washingtons, the Californias. You may see that happen, but it may be offset by adding more licenses. But if we look at same store sales over the same period of time, and not in pulling out the new licenses, we're not going to have access to this data. But if you look at same store sales, which is, you look at a group of stores, right, or a group of businesses that were here during both periods of time, and you look at their growth in sales, I'm surely going to see a guess that there's going to be a negative downtrend because of the liquidity crisis that we're seeing all over the wall today in the markets and all over personal pockets for people throughout the country. So don't expect, you know, parabolic growth, continual great growth in sales for the cannabis industry, because a lot of this was artificially done and growing because of stimulus and people not thinking that this was a legit crisis here. So that's that. Keep your eye on that. Okay, let's talk about some new product stuff that came out in October that I thought was really cool. So Canopy and Acreage, they signed a deal to do THC infused beverages that are going to come out next month. So they're going to be doing what do you call these here? Just a collaboration and strategic partnerships and corporate partnerships here for distribution and many other things. But what this kind of brings us up to is that PBR, Pabst Blue Ribbon, they jumped on two big trends that we've been seeing, which is, you know, the cannabis industry, obviously it's a trending topic, and seltzers, things like the White Claws of the world and Trulies. So what PBR did, they're like almost a 200-year-old company. They created, Pabst, cannabis infused drink, 5 milligrams per can. It's a responsible dosage is what they say. We'll see how this all shakes out for them. I think it's a really cool thing to see them moving into this industry. If they start to see success with it, expect other big multinational, large CPG brands to jump in if they can. If not with the parent CPG brand, they may start to do kind of what is that group? Goldman Sachs did, right? Goldman Sachs kind of like, people left Goldman Sachs and they started to create a cannabis investment arm. But when you leave Goldman Sachs, you're still part of the alumni of that group. You may be seeing that same thing for CPG companies, where CPG companies, they tell a VP or an executive director or a senior VP, hey, go out, start this new thing over here, and we're going to keep you as an M&A target for 24 to 36 months. I don't think that's too far-fetched of an idea. You may see CPG brands start to do spin-offs under the radar, stealth, that don't affect their publicly traded group. So we'll see how that comes out. So let me jump in here and see if there's any questions. I don't see any questions specifically in the chat. So jump into the chat, drop your questions, anything from small stuff to big stuff, anything you want to talk about here. We're about an hour in. I'm enjoying this. I love this stuff here. I'm going to answer two questions that I got before this all started here, before the live stream. So the first question, Angela asks, you said to show off your product and show how my product is different, but if we aren't legal in our state, how do I present my product if I wanted to open up a cultivation facility? Now, this is a question that I got via email about a video that I did regarding creating a cannabis pitch deck and getting ready for investors. My advice was, hey, show off your products and show how great they are and why they're special, right? This is called like your moat or your point of differentiation, things like that. What makes you defensible against your competitors? Now, great question. But when you are pre-product, then it's best to show out and show off the aspects of your business, such as your team behind the products, right? Your team is still the product. Things like their experience, their skill sets, right? Do they come from CPG? Are they scientists? Have they done mass cultivation of other crops? And you also want to discuss your partnerships or connections in the industry. Maybe your uncle works in a big cannabis business, or your best roommate from college is in this part of the industry, or blah, 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 or your teammate is in the medical field and does treatment for this or that. So that's one way to show off. Now, growing cannabis is not very, very difficult. To do it very well is very difficult, but growing it is not difficult. A lot of people do it, but not everyone can get distribution for their products into stores. So showing off how you can do that as a cultivator is pretty powerful when you're going to talk to investors. Now, aside from that, you can show off the assets that make the deal attractive, such as property that you own and things that you're going to grow on, or any other assets that you have that make you a good investment. And lastly, if you really want to show off your product in a place where, hey, you can't commercially grow, most states have a medical cannabis small scale grow operations. Show off how you can do it in a small scale way, and then demonstrate how you can scale up this operation. So if you are in a place where you cannot do commercial cannabis activity, this is one of the ways to show off your product as well as help to entice investors. Now I see some questions came in here, so let's hop in here. Can you grow at home indoors at a micro business license? This depends on the state, but pretty much you cannot do any commercial cannabis business activity in your primary residence. Now in Oklahoma, you can have a building on your property. If you look at one of our recent podcasts with Andrew Orange of Happy Cannabis Farms, he grows on a property that he owns, but it's not inside of his house. It's a separate building. So you cannot, probably not grow on a micro biz license in your home. So that's the answer to that question. Now, Jeff Tidwell asks here, where can I find a chart of accounts for a cultivation operation? You can reach out to us. We can help do a chart of accounts for you. It's going to be, detailed specifically on your operation. You can get a general chart of accounts, but that's not going to be indicative to specifically your operation, because you could have indoor and outdoor, right? Chart of accounts, what that is, explicitly coding out specifically where all of your expenses go to. And you want to be able to break down, say if you buy nutrients, you want to be able to break down your nutrients costs by indoor and by outdoor. And if you're being very granular, by strain or by room or by plot on your grow operation. So reach out to us, go to our website, fill that out. You can speak with our team. We can get you a chart of accounts for your cannabis business. Now, Jason said, thanks, cool. For indoor cultivation, still, you can reach out to us. We can help you with that chart of accounts, right? All the ones that are going to be on the internet, you may find one. QuickBooks may even have a cannabis one now, likely not. But you're going to need to get something, not off the shelf. Everything is, typically going to be custom. If you can't make your own chart of accounts, you probably can't do your own accounting. So that's why you should probably reach out to a CPA, see if we can help you out. I know we can help you out, but see if it's something that fits, into your specific business, and if you're willing to invest in CPA services for that. So hopefully that answers your question there. Now, another question I got was from Jennifer, and she asked, and this ties into the New York topic that we were talking about earlier, which says, I'm trying to get into New York for when it goes recreationally legal. We have agriculture experience and we have operated businesses before on our own. What are some thoughts on what we should expect to prepare for when New York does licensing? I think first thing to prepare for is that it's going to be incredibly limited in licensing, and it's going to be incredibly expensive in licensing. So that's just the first two hot takes on that. But first, for everyone that wants to get into any market, New York or otherwise, get involved in your local cannabis community by either volunteering for advocacy programs or working in the cannabis industry, the medical industry, at a shop, at a cultivation operation, at a manufacturing facility, anything. Just get involved. This is the most critical aspect of success. I think one of the most critical, not the most, but one of the most critical aspects in early phases is getting a part of the community, because you want to start building up goodwill in that community and add value to that community. Because if you do some bad things, right, the community is still very, very small. And if you're not part of it, you're not part of the conversation. And when you do something sideways or do something wrong, there's going to be a conversation happening out there about you, and you're not part of it, and you have no way to damage control. So be part of that community is number one. Now, number two, if you're a newbie, have no cannabis experience, have no cannabis businesses in any other states, then start to look and find favorable cities. This is good if there's already a medical market there. Where are the medical businesses highly concentrated? Where are they not? Are there any, cities that have been, very outspoken about don't bring cannabis to our city? Those are the ones you want to avoid. Where the businesses are concentrated, that's where you want to move to. So look at where all their, total addressable market, how many patients are within, a certain mile radius of your business, right? Or where your prospective business will be at. The second one here is build out a budget. You need to know what this is going to cost you before you even get started, right? I would say at least have $1 to $2, maybe even $5 million. It sounds like a lot, but I'm really going on the low side here, because you probably won't be able to find a building for less than $1 or $2 million in the state of New York, unless it's upstate New York. So have a lot of money and build out the budget. Work with someone who understands the industry, can help you create pro forma financial projections that are based in reality and have good, reasonable assumptions on that state or city you're trying to get into. Now, from that, build up your team. Make sure that you're building up your team. It's very important that you build up and find the right team, right? The operations people, the back office people, the front of house people that are, if you're retail, who's going to be, the one running the front of house, who's going to be running the back of house and doing inventory management. You're not going to find everybody, but at least the core senior team needs to be well built out, because investors don't invest in the idea of cannabis. They're investing in the team behind that. Because again, cannabis is not a novel idea anymore. They want to know who is the team executing this, right? You bet on the jockey, not on the horse. Now, from there, either you're going to have to raise funds or self-fund your business. If you can self-fund, great, but you're going to go through the licensing process and all of that. Now, if you are well capitalized, you have money, you're ready to go, you may want to consider buying a medical cannabis business, because typically when a state goes from medical to recreational, these medical shops have first, or medical businesses grow or otherwise, or retail or manufacturing, they usually have first dibs on these recreational licenses. So going to spend that $5 or $10 million on a medical business will almost guarantee, as long as it's compliant, that you will get a recreational license. That now, boom, kicks up the value of the entity or of the business significantly. And now you can make some arbitrage, maybe exit right away or pull out your investment, sell out some to some other groups. That's one way to do it. So hopefully that has helped you understand how to move into a market that is not, licensing yet, but how to kind of get ahead of that wave. Now, if you need help with any of these aspects, please reach out to us via our website at greengrowcpas.com, or give us a call at 800-674-9050. All right, Jason says here, I'd like to get a micro license in Los Angeles County. Are you seeing problems there? I see shops in surrounding counties, but not a lot in LA, mostly delivery businesses for medical only. You will not get a microbiz license in LA if you're not social equity. I don't even think they're doing microbiz licenses anymore. That was for phase 2 of the licensing process, which was almost 2 years ago. So pretty much likely you're not going to get a brand new one. You could potentially go out and buy one. I would say make sure you have multiple millions, potentially even tens of millions for that, because you're going to have to buy the property as well as the licenses on that, Jason. And you're going to need a lot of operating capital on that too. So that's pretty important on that. You could see to move out to other areas, whatever's financially sound for you, right? It's all about the financials. It's really, really important to build a financially stable business. So looking into these businesses, as Sharon pointed out earlier, she looked at the financials for 20 businesses and she only made a buy rec on 5%. So 1 in 19 out of 20 businesses aren't worth the paper that the financial statements are printed on. Most are not worth anything. They're actually sitting in debt. So there's, that business is just going to flounder out and that debt doesn't go away. You can't file bankruptcy as a cannabis business. So they're going to have to just pay that for the rest until it's over, because investors are just going to hound them, push them into receivership. They'll do as much as they can to recover that money back. So microbiz in LA, you're probably going to have to buy one. You're not going to get licensed for one as a new business. Now, Peter asked what percent of our clients are in California. I think it's just over 50% of our clients are in California on client-wise. Revenue-wise, I'm not sure specifically, but we've got a big footprint in. I think we're in 25 states now of clients, and lots in Oklahoma, a lot that are in Oregon, lots in Colorado, a fair amount in Michigan now. We helped a few people through the Illinois process. We have clients in Illinois, Florida, some international clients. So hopefully that answers your question there. Let's see here. One that asks, is this just for CA or can this apply to Colorado? Your username ends in 638. If you could just add on specifically what is this, and I can answer that specific question for you. But if you're talking about the microbiz license, I'm not sure specifically on the licensing in Colorado, but for California, specifically in LA, there is probably never, well, not never, I don't want to say never. I never say never. But in the near term, you will not find any new licensing for microbiz licenses. If you don't know what a microbiz license is, a microbiz license is essentially allowing you to be a vertically integrated cannabis business all inside of one building where you can just move things around from one room to the next. It's pretty convenient, allows you again to be vertically integrated and capture the entire value chain of your cannabis business. Because if you're not vertically integrated, you're pretty much picking up breadcrumbs here and there. If you're vertically integrated, you can kind of get that whole loaf and make any kind of loaf that you want, which is pretty cool. So hopefully that helps to answer your question there. Drop questions in, anything. It can be very detailed. It can be very general. Anything you want to know here about the cannabis industry, I will do my best to answer to the best of my ability. If I don't know, I won't answer. I'll put you in contact with the right person. Okay, so it is about the micro business. Again, I don't know about the micro business stuff that's going on in Colorado. You can look into that. Or, hey, reach out to us. Have one of our team members do a quick little dive on it for you. Just go to Green Growth CPAs. It's on the screen here. You can see it. Go to our website. Click on the Get Started button in the top right corner here. And that will then go ahead and fill out the form. And you can get some time to schedule time right there on the website to speak with our team. Please, if you're watching this and you have questions, like detailed questions that I cannot answer, or you think of something later down the road, go to our website, schedule time to chat with our team. We're here. We got some people just sitting around all day waiting to talk to you. We would love to talk with you and help you out. Our cultivation, Jason asks here, are cultivation licenses still available in California for non-millionaires? Yeah, there's a ton of them. You don't have to be. What's cool about cultivation is you don't want to be in the city of LA. The kilowatt hour there, compared to what it is, way out in the high desert, Adelanto, Cathedral City, what is the other one? Coachella Valley. You can go out there and you can get, sub $1 million with the whole build out, the whole kit probably, or you can start small and then use your cash flow to build out over time. Again, don't feel like you have to start with the biggest grow operation. When you start small, you don't get to have the benefit of economies of scale, but you also don't have the headache of like, oh my goodness, there's just so much going on. Are we going to make this and that happen? Really, it's tough. So go ahead, and you can reach out to us. We have businesses that are available for sale. People reach out to us all the time trying to sell their businesses or trying to buy businesses. So we do our best to broker deals. I think we've probably done less than 10, but more than 5 deals this year, even during these pretty wild times. I think primarily in California. I know there was one in Oklahoma we did, I think 2 or 3 in California, and probably another one somewhere else, but at least 5 deals in buying and selling businesses in the past 12 months. So reach out to us. We could probably find you one of those businesses. But hey, look into licensing. We also have a list of all the cities that are licensing. So reach out to us. We can kind of walk you through what that looks like. But anybody watching this, please do not go try to grow cannabis in downtown LA. It's so expensive. You're not going to be able to make your money back on it. Go out to these lesser expensive areas, because you can't sell direct to consumer anyway. So why be where the consumers are? Go where it's cheaper to produce, so your cost per gram is much, much lower. Then you can go and you can beat, these groups that are paying incredibly high rents. They're paying mini bar prices for the electricity and water out there. So, consider going out further away if you're going to be. And you can go way up north in California. You saw that we were talking about Humboldt is loosening the requirements for the smaller operations. You may be able to catch something out there. Sharon says, do we have a list of businesses for sale? I have inventory looking. Yeah. Sharon, hey, we need to chat, Sharon. I'm going to have to give you a call here. I'll make sure that I give you a call. We need to chat specifically on a few things, it sounds like, and we'll go over all that stuff. Yeah, I have investors too looking for businesses as well. So Sharon, I'll give you a call. Peter asks here, what is the approximate average net profit margin you see in manufacturing? This is a loaded question, my guy, but this is a good question here. And this is going to be more detailed. I think this is going to be one that, what's his face? Marco will have to speak more to, who's our audit partner. He runs our CFO service. I don't have the answer to that question. I'm going to be quite honest, and I would just be shooting from the hip here. But I will give some general guidance here on something. Oh, got you. You're talking to him right now. So I'll give you some general guidance here. Net profit margin is going to be the smallest for retail and the highest for cultivation. If you're vertically integrated, your profit margin is going to be much, much higher. Let me pull up a document here. If you guys can just bear with me, I'll give you a little bit of guidance on something else that I do have, a fact book I have here. See if I can find it. It's that one. But keep dropping in questions here. I'm going to find this document of a P&L we just did of a vertically integrated. Keep 1 second. All right, another question here, and I'm still looking for this document. With the wildfires going on in California, it's still a good place to start a cultivation grow. It's really up to you. I mean, if you're willing to relocate and you're not in California, because look, once interstate commerce, and we talked about this, I made a video 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe 4, on interstate cannabis commerce. Peter, I will get back to your question, but let me answer this one here. Buying a cultivation facility or producing cannabis in expensive places like California that have high business taxes, basic business taxes, high cannabis taxes, a very unfriendly cannabis regulatory, it's like incredibly hard to start a business there. Once interstate cannabis commerce is legal, people are going to move to places where they can produce for cheaper, primarily in the mid part of the country, because now your whole total addressable market is the entire country here. This is big business now. So you look at places like Oklahoma. Why Oklahoma? Why? I keep talking about Oklahoma. I'm partial to it because 3 main reasons. Let's talk about 2. It's very, very cheap to be there. So it means your cost of production is significantly lower. Your cost of getting all of the property is lower. The licensing, it is $2,500 to $10,000 for a license. That's it. You look at other places, it's, at 50 grand, 20,000 per license every year. It's not like that. So very cheap costs and cheap to produce. Second part, there's a lot of agriculture knowledge there. I was on a farm that had 160 acres of cannabis. I mean, there was not all planted cannabis, but the farm is 160. They produced 30,000 pounds of cannabis this year, their first harvest. That's a lot. That is like $30 million. And they're just messing around, pretty much is what this guy said. He's just another crop to him. So that's why I like that. And also, it's only one or 2 days from each coast. Now, you look at California, you can never grow all your cannabis and sell it off to New York. You'd have to go through, all these other states. So you're pretty much sitting on older cannabis. If you start to produce and distribute through Oklahoma, there's the I-40 going east-west and the I-35 going north-south, giving them access to pretty much any quadrant in the country within 1 day or 1.5 or 2 days max to get up to those way high north parts. So if you're looking in long-term, California may not be the spot. But if you're looking for something premium, like how we talked about SB 67, how they're doing the appellations, where you can say, hey, this is, Palos Verdes cannabis grown on this mountain, and that holds a particular type of premium that someone's willing to pay a premium for, then maybe California is right for you. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. Hey, wildfires are just ravaging, and I don't think this is going to stop. I was in California for 11 years, so not that long, very, very short amount of time, but it had gotten significantly worse every year. This year specifically, fire season started 30 days earlier, and it was the most devastating fires ever in California's history. And we're still not done with them, right? There's fires going on right now in Irvine. It's crazy. So who knows? The California fires may not be the best thing for cannabis businesses, that's for sure. All right, I'm going to go here and go ahead and drop more questions in. I'm going to drop in here and look for one more thing to answer Peter's question. I apologize, Peter, for delays on this. Let me just look up one thing real quick and see if I have. One second here. All right, here it is. All right, so this is by store. Let's go by vertical here. Almost pulled up, y'all. Almost pulled up. All right. If you have any more questions, drop them in. All right. The workbook's opening now. Give me a second, y'all. All right. So when you're looking at net profit margin here, so things like edible labs, probably about 25 to 30% margins here, net margins. If you're looking at grow operations, probably a 40 to 50 up to 60% net profit margins. So looking at that, you're looking at your retail. Let me see here, is the retail stuff on here? I don't have the retail stuff on here, but it's going to vary. I mean, your implementation and your execution is critical to you telling you what your net profit margin is going to be, Peter. So yeah, you can look at industry averages, but you can look at that, but you probably won't be at that right away. There is a ramp up period in that. So yeah, by manufacturing. But if you're doing like a kitchen, right? The group that we're talking to, there's like a specific license just for kitchen. So that's one part in there, right? They do like the edibles, like the gummies, the tinctures, and things like that. So that could be there for what you're looking at. But look into reaching out to us. We can walk you through. There's a fact book. I don't have the book specifically with me right now, but there are things out there you can look through those. But reach out to us and we can look at specifically in your area on that. Jason said, I'd be interested in buying businesses as well. I have partners here in SoCal, mainly interested in cultivation. Victorville is pretty close. Someone specific we should speak to when we call. Hey, yeah, just reach out. So if you're going to call, you're going to get an answering. Speak to our receptionist. Just leave notes about specifically what you're calling on, and then the right person will see those notes and give you a call back. So our receptionist just takes the notes, makes the comments, and then sends it out to the callback team. So they'll be able to talk to you about that specifically. So, all right, we're rounding it out here. We've been for an hour and a half. We got a ton of people still in the room here. on multiple platforms. So again, thank you for joining. I'll be here for 3 more minutes. So any last questions, please drop them in. This is a good live stream here. I'm glad people are on. Hopefully this is providing some value. I've enjoyed this, please just drop a comment in there or something, just so I know I'm not just talking to the, I know I'm not talking to the ether here, but that you are finding this valuable. I see you're sticking around, so you must find it valuable, hopefully. Awesome. Jason, thank you. I'm glad you guys are enjoying this here. But any last questions, drop them in. All right, Peter asks, is there a rough rule of thumb for value of California licenses at startup, no revenues? Okay, valuation. I just did a video on valuations here. But I will, here, let me hit on one real quick, and then I'll get to yours. New City asks, what state am I most excited about right now? I think I'm most excited about New Jersey becoming legal next week. I'm pretty sure it'll pass. And then it's going to put immense pressure on New York. They're pretty much, they share so many citizens back and forth. They're just going to have to do it. That's where the April thing really gets me going. Like New York does it, and then Vermont does it, and then boom, we've got the Northeast pack. So that's what I'm really excited for. Now, a rough value of licenses in California. So let's just talk about basic. What do you look at when you're valuing a license pre-revenue? Okay, no money made at all. You're going to look at a few things. Primary levers here of value. How much did it cost to get this license? Okay, you're going to have legal fees, rent, licensing application fees, security fees, environmental plans, all this stuff. That's one part of it. Now, there's also the premium part, which is going to be how long did it take for someone to go through this process? Now, if it's typically an 18-month process, how much is that worth to the buyer to get, not wait those 18 months and to go right into business if it's turnkey, especially, right? So that's kind of what you look at, especially pre-revenue. And then the premium also is based on the limitation of the licenses. Look at Pasadena. 6 licenses available. If you don't know what Pasadena is, if you know what the Rose Bowl is, big, huge football game. It's a big tourist destination area. They have 6 licenses. People like MedMen and other big MSOs are in there. But guess what? It's sitting in a bunch of lawsuits right now. And even the licensees are suing each other. So if you have limited licenses like a Pasadena, great, value goes up. If you have unlimited licenses like LA, probably not as much. But that's the way to kind of look at the valuation of a pre-revenue cannabis business license. If you look back on our YouTube channel, go in there on the search button and just type in cannabis business valuations. I did a whole live stream on this. It's got 10 factors for licensing valuations. You should really look into that. I might drop it into the chat here while we're talking right here. Thank you I'm glad everybody's liking this stuff here. 638 asks, is Colorado a good place to start a cultivation and manufacturing business? He's from Texas, or she is from Texas. I mean, it really comes down to where do you want to operate your business, right? Most regulatory environments are the same, except for Oklahoma. I know I keep banging it. Oklahoma is great, but you have to look at where do you want to be? Where do you want to live? You have to live your life too. Do you want to live in the cold? If you don't, you're going to be miserable and hate your life. But I own a cannabis business, but you're miserable, happiness needs to be the ROI besides money. Whoever's on this still, do not get into the cannabis industry because you think you're going to make money. Do it because you love it. Do it because you want to push the industry forward. Do it because you have long range, horizon on this, because there's not a lot of money in the cannabis industry, contrary to what you hear in the news. If you hear think the industry is what the news is, you're like, oh man, we're doing the Donald Duck thing and we're diving into a bunch of money and swimming around. It's not like that. It's not like that. You're diving into a bunch of red tape. It's going to cause you a bunch of headache, and you won't plow through all that red tape if you don't love it, if you don't have a passion, if you won't stay up till 3 a.m. talking and doing and writing a rebuttal to a licensing thing because of this or that. You have to love this or you will not survive in this industry. So is Colorado great? There's so many factors. I would love to say yes. I would love to tell you no, but I can't go into the nuances of is it right or not for you. Let me go ahead and find this licensing video I did here, the license valuation. Go ahead and drop any last questions in. I'll stay I know I've stayed a little bit longer than I said I would, but go ahead and drop that in here if you have any more questions. All right, let me just try to find this video. I'll drop it in the chat so everybody has it that watches the replay as well. I did it right here, 23 minutes. It's a beautiful video. It will help you answer. Peter right here. Watch that. If you have questions, please give me a call, and I'll make sure that you get what you need. But cool. Looks like no other questions. It seems like you guys really enjoyed this. So again, thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions about anything related to the cannabis industry, then please reach out to us via our website at greengrowcpas.com. It's on the screen right here. All right. Click on the green button on the top right corner. Fill out the form. Please speak with our team. We would love to help you out. And if you don't want to do the website, just give us a call, 800-674-9050. Again, thank you very much for your time today. I've enjoyed myself. Hopefully you have as well. And we have another one of these coming up at the end of November. We have live streams coming up all the time. So please hop onto those live streams, watch our video, go to the YouTube channel, check out all the different videos we're making. It's very hard to catch everything we're doing because we're doing 4 or 5 videos a week now. Go to our Instagram, instagram.com/greengrowcpas. A lot of little bite-sized content. Look, we're going for an hour and a half here. I don't think anybody's going to watch the full replay. So if you need little bite-sized content, go to our Instagram, go to our Facebook, check us out on LinkedIn. There's a lot going on there. But again, have a beautiful rest of your day. Have an amazing rest of your week. Go out and vote on Tuesday. Make your voice heard. Have a good one. We'll talk to you soon. See you.